I'm sure you've heard of bands like Periphery, Animals as Leaders, Polyphia, Era, Northlane, and so forth. You know, all the biggest names from the progressive metal gent movement. You might not be as familiar with Tesseract, but if you like any of the bands that I mentioned above, then you should definitely get to know Tesseract because they are one of the founding fathers of the genre, among the very first to pioneer that sound. You may not hear their name as much probably because they're pretty quiet, low-key guys who don't put themselves out there on social media as much as some of those other bands. But trust me, everybody in the industry is highly aware of their influence and they're highly, highly respected. We were fortunate to have their main writer and producer, Canny, on Nail the Mix, and I can tell you that he's a brilliant guy. And today we're going to take a look at the documentary around their latest album, The War of Being. I don't know what to expect from this documentary because I actually don't know that much about it, but I'm excited to see it because I know that this is a really deep concept album and everything these guys do is very deliberate and intentional. So I bet you there's a lot of good takeaways to get from this. So let's get into this documentary and see what we can learn. I actually think it's kind of cool that people are sitting down at this show. I'm all in favor of, you know, crowds going nuts and all that entails. Like, I wouldn't want to be sitting down at a Slipknot show, but for this kind of music, a lot of this kind of music is just sit and watch. You know, you're not going to go nuts. So I like that they have chairs. Call me old. Sick riff.
I think this is a crucial time for Tesseract, if I'm being very honest. The last album didn't turn out the way we wanted it to turn out. I feel like the songs that we wrote would have had even more impact if we as a band would have had more time to really nail the sound of that album. And so I think that's always been in the back of my mind, is that the next record has to be a statement.
You know, that's a problem for lots of records. That's actually why bands on their second albums consider that to be the toughest one in your career, because I'm sure you've all heard this, but you spend 10 years working up to your first album and then you have 6 months to write the second one. And sometimes bands are good to go with that. And sometimes that's why second albums tend to suffer. Now, I realize Tesseract have lots of records, but it's still the same thing. You know, when a band tours a lot and has other stuff going on, a band sometimes might just need more time because you can't always put a time frame on what it takes to make great art. Sometimes it's going to take longer, but budgets are a real thing in the real world. You run out of budget and therefore you run out of time and you got to live with the results. It is what it is. Middle Farm Studios. Everyone should go to the website for that studio after this video. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous studio in England, like just kind of a fantasy studio.
We really needed somewhere where the band could perform as a band. We've always wanted to capture some of the messing around that we do live, say in soundcheck, where instead of just meticulously going over things, there's an energy where you just love.
Very few metal bands are capable of pulling this off. I know Meshuggah did it. We actually have a Nail the Mix for the song Monster City with Dewey Madsen, where it is the Meshuggah quote-unquote live record. I believe Opeth has done that too. But it is a very rare metal band that's able to actually do this semi-live recordings because you just have to be at the top of your game. And if you know what metal sounds like in a rehearsal room or when bands are playing live, in general, it's going to sound like shit without a lot of work. And in general, bands are just not tight enough to do this at studio level live. They're just not. So hats off to Tesseract for being able to even pull this off in the first place.
So this is the first time we've recorded as a real band, like since the first album, I think, which was 12 years ago. And so we've actually done it properly this time, whereas in the past it's always just been me programming the drums at my place. Usually just down to like time and budget has always been an issue, but this time we've done it properly.
That's something interesting about these gent bands I've noticed. Not just gent bands, but just modern bands, is sometimes they will program drums, even if they have a really great drummer and the drummer's cool with it, because it's the biggest money and time saver, and money and time is limited, like I was saying earlier. And so in lots of cases, and controversial statement here, but I really do believe it, it's better to have really great programmed drums than a mediocre drum recording in lots of cases, even though Tesseract's drummer is fucking great. It could be that they just didn't have the budget to actually get the drums done right, and they could get a better result with programming. And everybody knows he can play it, so it is what it is.
Which note are you hearing? The transient, like the ring?
The learning was the biggest part of this for me, without a doubt. Generally, my learning process is listen and listen and listen and listen. And then I rely on ability for a lot of it, which I think we all do in Tesseract to a degree. We are confident enough in our own abilities and we know the song, so we can play it. Or at least that's how I feel most of the time. For this one, that wasn't going to cut it at all. You can't go into a studio just trusting that. So I've had to zoom in to specific sections of songs, learn it a couple of bars at a time, really slowly, just to get that detail in, because it's just too difficult.
I also imagine that if they were programming the drums on earlier records, that he had a lot more time to learn the songs because he wasn't actually recording them. So he could live with the finished songs for X amount of time between the time that they wrote them and finished recording them all the way until when the first tour was. Who knows? It could be a month later. It could be 6 months later. You don't know. That's a lot more time for him to learn it than everybody else who had to learn it for the studio. So this is probably something that threw him for a loop, is having to learn the songs as they were being written. It's a lot more difficult. And you know, like with the Cannibal Corpse reaction I did, they added something new to their workflow, which is a click track. If you go check out the Evisceration Plague reaction, they had never used a click track before that, and I was saying that it's so awesome to see a veteran band try to up their game. And just like this, I mean, Tesseract is a successful band. They could have just kept on programming drums, but they're still trying to step up their game, which is, you know, one of the reasons for why they're successful. They're not complacent.
One thing that my producers are really keen on is the flow and the emotional connection. So it's not always about even pitch for the producers. It's about how it makes you feel when you listen to it, which I totally get. And sometimes I feel like I do perhaps miss those opportunities when I'm recording myself, because I'm so micro-focused on the detail of trying to get the quality and not really always focused on getting the emotion. I feel like we've struck a really nice balance between us now, where we're actually not only getting quality good takes, but we're finding little bits here and there that have great quality, some beautiful nuances, and lots of emotion.
This is one of the best arguments for having a producer, or at least an engineer, who understands the kind of music you're making. It's because when you're performing, you don't actually have an accurate picture of what you sound like. I mean, think about tracking guitars. You're tracking guitars, you're feeling the vibrations of the instrument through your body. You might be hearing acoustic pick noise in the room. And so you could trick yourself into thinking that you were playing a lot more percussively and with power than you actually were. I'm sure lots of guitar players watching this will remember a time where they thought they sounded awesome while they were tracking, heard it back, and then it sounded like mush. On top of that, while you're recording, so much of your energy is going towards getting it right. And with the more technical the music is, there are just more variables to think about. So having somebody else who you trust saying, that doesn't feel right, more emotion there, or whatever it is, whatever suggestion that they're making, that's super, super helpful, because we can get super tunnel visioned about certain aspects. Like, say you're doing a very, very difficult pattern on guitar, like some crazy Meshuggah-like rhythm, and you're focused so hard on getting it precise that you don't realize that maybe that you're palm muting it not exactly in the sweet spot and it doesn't sound as cool as it could. You're so focused on playing it right that some of the little nuances are, you know, getting by you. That's where having a producer or an engineer to be like, hey, move where you're palm muting a bit, change your pick angle a little bit. Super, super helpful.
There's so many branches to Tesseract. You've got Ackle very much, you know, in creating, he creates everything musically, but he's very much needing to be focused on, you know, the guitars. And then you've got Pete working closely with Jay on the drums and with Moss on the bass. And he was like, it would be really great if Dan had someone to work with whilst that stuff's happening. And he spoke to me about doing it, and I said, yeah, that sounds great. I love Tesseract. That would be really cool. And then I think he sent them my album, and on hearing that, they liked it. They liked what I'd done. They liked how me and Pete worked together. And then they were interested in meeting me to talk about, you know, whether I would be involved in the record.
For those of you out there who want to become professional producers and mixers and you're not getting any headway with clients, people just aren't coming to you, the number one reason for why people get hired is the previous work they've done. So if you don't have work out there that people like, if you don't have a way for people to basically be inspired by what you did and say, I want that on my record, it's going to be really, really tough. Like with her, this is a perfect example. They liked her self-production on her own record. That's basically how it works. People love somebody else's stuff and they want that. So if you don't have that, there are some things you can do. Like for instance, put out your own music, or try to do somebody else's music for free. Or at URM, we have something called Portfolio Builder, where you get tracks that you can use in your portfolio. And speaking of URM, this video is brought to you by Nail the Mix. If you want to learn how to mix and master metal, Nail the Mix is the place to do it, straight from the best. Mixers like Will Putney, Buster Odeholm, Jens Bogren, Nolly, TLA, David Bendeth, and artists such as Gojira, Meshuggah, Periphery, Opeth, Nickelback, and over 100 more. At the start of the month, we released the raw multi-tracks from the session so you can download them straight into your DAW and mix the song from scratch. Getting your hands on this kind of source material is an incredible learning opportunity, just so you can see what the standard really is like at this level. Then, at the end of the month, the mixer does a live stream where they break down exactly how they mixed it on the record and answers your questions live. You can also join our monthly mixing competition. Submit your mix, vote for your favorites, and win prizes like microphones, guitars, plugins, gear, and a lot more cool stuff. And your membership comes packed with extras. All the URM plugins, MixLab with over 150 tutorials, Riff Hard for guitarists, and access to our private community on Discord and Facebook. So if you're serious about leveling up your mixes and learning from the very best, check out nailthemix.com today. It's at the link in the description of this video.
I can genuinely say that I probably wouldn't have gotten the quality of takes and pushed myself to the limits that I have done by myself.
I think like the reason this has worked so well is because I love the music so much, and we get along really well. I don't know if I could do this for many other bands. I feel like this might be a one-off. The combination of the concept, the music, the guys, and the way that me and Dan work has made this pretty perfect, and I think this might be the only time I do it.
So the fact that she loves the band is really, really important. Back to what I was saying about producers trying to get work with bands. You're not going to be able to love every band you work with. The more genuinely excited you can get about somebody else's music, the more inclined people are going to be to work with you. Lots of times people will go with the person that's more excited than the person that's more popular because they want someone that's going to take their art seriously. Those are some gorgeous vocal harmonies.
So I started off tracking guitars in the main room, Studio A, with the intention of using real amps. Like, I tried out some Diesels, Marshalls, Messers. They sound nice, but I'm just so used to using Axe-FXs and Quad Cortexes and things. I couldn't even pick between which one of these to use. Like on the previous album it was Kemper, Polaris and Altered State was Axe-FX 1, but most of the tones have been, for rhythm tone has been Axe-FX 2, layered with Kemper presets, and then a lot of the clean and lead stuff is Quad Cortex, so it's been a mix of everything really. Although we did profile the Diesel into the Cortex.
You know, a lot of people say that tube amps sound better, and in some cases maybe they do, but what really matters is what you do your best work on. So if you do your best work on an Axe-FX, use a fucking Axe-FX. It doesn't matter what other people say about gear. It doesn't matter if a lot of other people say, I only use tube amps. It's tube amps for me. If you do your best work on an Axe-FX, use a fucking Axe-FX. If you do your best work on a tube amp, use a tube amp. It doesn't fucking matter. All that matters is that it sounds great.
Setup is not where Tesseract has performed before. It's not our comfort zone. And I think that's part of Peter Miles. His approach was to get us to step out of our comfort zone. Tesseract to meet in the middle between, say, Ackles incredible vision, and what he does when he's producing in isolation, and what we can do live as a group. You almost give each other a nod and say, we're going to go there, we're going to go to this place, and it's a cool thing, and I really hope it comes across on the album as being different, because chances are it is a change for Tesseract.
Work was done. Evidence that work was done.
Yeah, so 0, 3, 3, 1, 4, 3.
In lieu of Guitar Pro, the other tried and true method of teaching your band members your parts is to film them and explain them.
What shocked me is how good it sounded almost immediately. Going from that room and then coming in here, oh shit, that sounds amazing. We paid a lot of attention to, we spent a week exploring sounds, which we haven't done before, and that process was great. Which kick drum is going to work, which kick drum skin is going to work, which cymbals are going to work, which microphones are going to work, let's just move the microphone. Like, so much of that, which enabled us to get everything to a point where we can just record the drums and come in here and it sounds huge and amazing, and then give Ackle the recordings of the drums for him to go into the studio next door, and he hasn't got to touch them. He hasn't had to touch the EQ, hasn't had to do anything. It's just, there's the drums, mate. That's amazing.
Unfortunately, when recording drums, one of the best ways to get them to sound as good as they possibly can is to put the time into it. And if you don't have much of a budget, that's going to be tough to do. But in my experience with records that I've worked on where there's been a budget, the tone really starts to come together around day 5 of getting tones. Meaning, at the end of day 1, we might have something okay. And at day 2, it's starting to come together. But something happens if you just keep going and keep going and keep optimizing to where the raw drums sound fucking amazing. And then you have to do less sample replacement, less of everything, because they already sound great from the get-go. That's really what you want. It just takes forever because there's so many moving pieces on a drum set. You've got the tuning of the heads, you've got the type of head, you've got the microphone placement, you've got the microphone choice, you've got the phase between all of them, you've got the type of sticks the drummer is hitting, how high are the cymbals, where are the room mics, what's the size of the room. All of these different factors, they come together to create the drum sound. Really, you just have to experiment with every single piece of the pie to get it to be as good as possible. It takes time. It really does. And I can think of one time where Trivium recorded their drums for In Waves at my old studio in my house, and Colin Richardson took something like 5 days just to find where in the drum room he wanted to place the kick drum. 5 fucking days. But who could argue the kick drum sounded amazing once he found the spot and mic'd it up perfectly. It took them like 3 weeks to do the drums. And well worth it. They sounded amazing.
Maybe there's an angle where we do the whole song on this one and then just drop in the mega riffs with like an even deeper snare, like drop the silver one down.
So what they're talking about there is something that, again, you can do with time. You need time to be able to do this, but they're using a deeper snare for the ghost note stuff, whichever was the main snare they picked for the hard hits. I've done that on records where I would use like a wooden snare for the lighter parts and something like a bell brass for the regular heavy playing. And being able to switch between the snares, it goes a really long way, but you need time to do it. There's something to be said for playing tom parts on a bass drum with mallets. It just sounds great. It's a specific kind of sound.
We were having a bit of a jokey argument either yesterday or today between myself and Pete. He was trying something wild and just cutting stuff out and throwing stuff around. And I was saying, that's not Tesseract. And he goes, precisely, this is Tesseract at the best that it can be from an external point of view. There's definitely a strength in modern editing with some parts if you want to really produce something that is about a final big picture, as opposed to narrowing down and saying, no, well, this is how I as a musician would do this. It can definitely be tough to take that ego armor, put it to one side and go, all right, I'm going to do the best thing from the viewpoint of the producer in this one.
I appreciate that. Get your ego out of the way. There's no room for that kind of stuff in a recording session, because you really just need to do whatever it takes to get the best sound possible. And so whatever editing you need to do, or if someone else needs to play some of your parts, or, this is kind of a common theme for me, but in sessions I've been involved with, one of the biggest problems that I've had personally, and I know lots of producers have this, is when band members refuse to have something done because of their pride. Now, I do not mean, just to be clear here, I do not mean when a band member doesn't like an idea. That's very different. The producer suggests something that they feel uncomfortable with artistically. Okay, it's the artist's record. They win. Absolutely. What I mean here is saying no to specific techniques. No one's going to know you did it. It just is going to make it sound better, but it's a hit to your ego, like editing drums or something. Like, why would any drummer be against that? But some are, because it's not them. That doesn't change the song if it's edited. It just makes it tighter. That's kind of what I mean. And so hats off to them for moving their ego aside and just being cool with doing whatever needed to be done. Mark of pros. Obviously, he's an awesome bass player. This isn't even that complicated of a bass part, but you can just tell from the tone and from the feel that this guy is a sick bass player, and he's cool with being edited. So what about bass players that are far worse than him having a problem with it? Makes you think. Kind of like with the click track examples that I gave, where I said click track doesn't kill the feel. If you think it kills the feel, you just don't know how to use it, because Gene Hoglan used one, Thomas Hockey uses one. Would anyone say that their feel isn't on? No, of course not. A lesser bass player might have a problem with being edited, yet this guy, who is at the top of his game, is okay with it. Go figure.
Just feels like a coincidence that a lot of the lyrics for some of the older songs have slotted into the concept so perfectly with minimal tweaks.
The concept is something like I really, really understand, because I feel like I've lived this world that is, been pinned behind us on the wall, and so I've kind of gone into it from that place. He came to the session with full lyrics for all the songs, and it's just been my job, I think, to help him sort of merge his world and his lyrical ideas with the concept, and also like finding new ways to say things, finding fresh ways to say things, and maybe coming at things from just a different perspective.
If you've ever tried to make a concept record, it's actually a lot harder than you might think, because not everything you write is going to work with the concept, and then you're going to need to change it in order to fit. That's a lot tougher to do if you're feeling something else. So, for instance, pretty recent and kind of famous example is Periphery's last album was going to be a concept album, and they got like halfway through or something, and then they just scrapped it and started all over and just made a Periphery record that wasn't a concept album, because it was just, they were working so hard on adhering to the concept that it was dragging the music down. I've personally had that happen to me as well. So if you can actually do a concept record and pull it off, that's a massive accomplishment. That's a gorgeous sounding reverb. I'm pretty sure that that's a modulating reverb back there. I can kind of hear it like Valhalla Shimmer, but just with the pitch effects turned down pretty far. I feel like I hear that in the background. It's just gorgeous. Notice how far away from the microphones they are for this chorus, as opposed to the previous part where they were right up on them. Microphone placement and in relation to where a vocalist is matters a lot, as does also there's a stone wall back here as opposed to a really treated, muted room. This is for a reason. They're doing that for a reason. They're not just randomly in front of a stone wall. It's probably because of how reverberant it is.
My name is Randy Slaw. I'm a producer, composer.
You might be noticing a common theme among the studio reactions I've been doing. A lot of these bands are bringing in session writers or session players, basically experts at things that the band members are not experts at. And I think that's really, really smart, because if you want to add this type of stuff like orchestration or synth, whatever it is, piano, and you guys in the band are maybe mediocre at best, you're great at everything else, but you just started learning how to do synth and you're just not that great at it, that's going to be a detriment to your record, as opposed to bringing in someone who's just as good as you are, but at that thing, who will work with you to get that thing to sound exactly the way you want it to sound. If you can afford it, it's worth it. Very nice use of bends in the riffs right there. Whatever works, right? That's a good look inside their process. And I think the big lesson here is that Tesseract's sound is built, not just captured. It's sonic architecture. The final product is the result of thousands of smart decisions along the way. The arrangements are designed to work together, the guitar tones are sculpted to fit, the bass is dialed to cut through a specific frequency range, and the drum performance is the foundation for everything. Every meticulous detail is considered. Here's an actionable and philosophical takeaway for you. Treat your recording and writing phases like you're pouring the foundation for a skyscraper. Before you even think about a mix, get your source tones as close to finished as is humanly possible. Don't lean on the mix as a crutch to save a mediocre source. Build it right from the ground up. So what was your biggest takeaway? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this, like, share, subscribe. See you next time.